It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the films of November 17th, 1995. A lot of big movies this weekend. We are getting close to the holiday season, so let's jump into it right now and start off with the biggest new release of the weekend for obvious reasons. It's the first movie with James Bond played by Pierce Brosnan, and that movie is, of course, Goldeneye.
You expecting someone else?
So I may have mentioned this when I did License to Kill in 1989. Pierce Brosnan was actually supposed to replace Roger Moore, but unfortunately he was stuck in a contract with NBC. NBC wouldn't let him out of his contract with Remington Steele, so they had to scramble to find a new person to take over, and that was Timothy Dalton, who took over for two movies with The Living Daylights and License to Kill. Probably two of the more underrated James Bond movies. I don't think anybody really gives Timothy Dalton his credit as James Bond, because a lot of what would eventually be shown in the Daniel Craig movies shows up in those movies, and I think they're very well done. I think they're very underrated films that deserve a lot more attention, but Pierce Brosnan now finally gets a chance to shine almost 10 years later, and some also notable things about this particular film is that because this was after License to Kill, the world politics had changed. This is the first James Bond movie to be produced since the fall of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of the Soviet Union, the end of the Cold War, and there's a lot of questions about whether or not James Bond could still be relevant in the modern world, and most people thought that it would be ridiculous to try to bring him back, and it's best to leave an icon in the past, but the people who made this movie had some ideas of how to do it. They could have gone with a period piece in the 1960s, a female 007, or a black James Bond, which really right now, with Daniel Craig now officially done with his films, that's pretty much where they might be going from there. I mean, you never know. Idris Elba could still end up being James Bond for all we know. But they decided to go back to the beginning of to what makes the series so unique, and it was seen as a successful revitalization they modernized it for a modern audience. One of the innovations they did was casting a female M. The M in this is, of course, played by Judi Dench. And the new M in this quickly establishes herself as remarking that Bond is a sexist, misogynistic dinosaur and a relic of the Cold War. And it's an early indication of Bond being far less tempestuous as Timothy Dalton was in the original James Bond movies. And because of what they did, this ends up becoming one of the best Bond movies. I mean, not only does it acknowledge the sillier and cliched things about the Bond films in the past, but it also does try to do something unique and different to make the franchise work in modern times. It helps that you have a guy like Martin Campbell, who has proven that he can not only resurrect James Bond once, but twice in two different generations, because he would do the same thing with the next James Bond, Daniel Craig. And we'll get to that one eventually when we get to 2006, but I mean, Goldeneye pretty much showed you that Pierce Brosnan was always the perfect choice to play James Bond. He just nails it so perfectly. He's got the feel of the character down. He also shows the humorous side, but also in those he should have in this situation he gets himself into. But he can also play it straight. He can also play it in a serious role. And not only that, you got a great story. It kind of is the equivalent to Patriot Games because, of course, you have Sean Bean in here, and it kind of has that similar concept to it. Maybe it's just because he was the villain in that film as well, but the action overall is pretty damn good. The song by Tina Turner in the beginning is great. The supporting cast is terrific. It's just a great film. And I can't bring up GoldenEye without bringing up the GoldenEye video game. Even though I didn't have the Nintendo 64, I had friends that had the N64. And we had a good time playing that one. And needless to say, that's one of the best movie adaptations of a video game ever. Video game adaptations of a movie ever, I should say. But, like I said, GoldenEye perfectly sets up Pierce Brosnan's Bond films on the right note. Everything's working in the right direction. They did a great job of bringing them into modern times. It's a near-perfect James Bond movie. It's easily one of the best films in the series and one to not be missed out on. I mean, if you haven't seen it by now, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. It's basically down to that, so. That's GoldenEye. Let's move on to the next movie that we have here, and that is Michael Douglas and Annette Bening starring in The American President.
He conveyed to you that he's sending his energy bill to the floor with a call for a 10% reduction. president's expecting our full support.
Yes, he is.
The president's dreaming, AJ. The president
Sydney critically misjudged reality. If he honestly thinks that the environmental community is going to whistle a happy tune while rallying support around this pitifully lame mockery of environmental leadership, then your boss is the chief executive of Fantasyland.
Good morning, Mr. President. How are you today? I couldn't be better. My apologies for the interruption.
Mr. President, I don't know what to say. I'm speechless.
All evidence to the contrary. What would happen if I called Sydney Wade and asked her to be my date at the state dinner on Thursday evening? President, you can't just go out on a date.
I'm having dinner at the White House.
I'm having lunch at the Kremlin.
I don't know what happened. One minute I was calling you a mockery of an environmental leader. The next minute I had a date.
She didn't say anything about me. Well, no, sir, but I can pass her a note before study hall. Would you like to dance?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, yes, sir. I'd love to.
Never mind that she is the hired gun of an ultra-liberal political action committee. And never mind that his 12-year-old daughter is sleeping down the hall.
Lucy, are you okay with this? My having dinner with a lady?
Dad, it's cool. Just go for it.
Never mind any of that, folks. My name is Bob Rumson, and I'm running for president. In the past 7 weeks, 59% of the country has begun to question your family values.
This poll doesn't talk about my presidency. This poll talks about my life.
I gotta nip this in the bud. This has catastrophe written all over it. Sydney, the man is the leader of the free world. He's brilliant, he's funny, he's an above-average dancer. Isn't it possible our standards are just a tad high?
Do you think there'll ever be a time when you can stand in a room with me and not think of me as the president?
So, of course, Rob Reiner's previous film was the infamously bad North, but here's what happens when you take a pretty solid ensemble cast and actually make a really damn good movie out of it. And Rob Reiner really redeemed himself after North, and he makes a pretty enjoyable romantic comedy with a concept that's very interesting. Like, you have a president here who's a widower. I mean, that's something that you don't ever see in movies, honestly. And he basically pursues a relationship with this lobbyist played by Annette Bening, and they end up having a chemistry together, and it's all in the matter of this bill that's taking place during a re-election year. Just a great cast overall. Michael Douglas, Annette Bening, Martin Sheen, David Paymer, Samantha Mathis, Michael J. Fox, John Mahoney, Wendy Malick, Shauna Waldron from Little Giants, Richard Dreyfuss, Joshua Malina, who would later be on The West Wing, and you could definitely see the influences that Aaron Sorkin took with him when he took this over to The West Wing. I mean, this is pretty much the prequel to The West Wing, right down to having the president in The West Wing, Martin Sheen, in here, and it's just an amazing movie. Like, Michael Douglas and Annette Bening have this amazing chemistry that just works, and it's a fun concept. It's a great story that you can get invested into, and it's a very intriguing story. It's a nicely made film, and it definitely puts Rob Reiner back on track after the North really damaged his career a lot, when you really think about it. But this is a nice return for him. It's a nice return for him. He gets a lot of great performances out of this. It's one of the best movies that came out in '95. It's a movie that has its heart in the right place. It's a fun movie. It's a great film that also can be seen as a mainstream romantic comedy that works really well. I love this movie, man. I think this is a fantastic film. That's The American President. So let's move on to the next movie that we have here, and that is the Olsen twins in their feature film debut, It Takes Two, with Kirstie Alley and Steve Guttenberg.
Cookie, muffin, but don't marry girls like me.
She's met the perfect guy.
Now you should look like a real jerk on a horse.
Oh, he's fallen for the perfect girl.
You really should put some iodine on your butt. Cut.
Now, two identical strangers
Let's get this show on the road!
must stop him from marrying the wrong woman.
Yes!
Kirstie Alley, Steve Guttenberg, the Olsen twins, Mary Kate and Ashley. It Takes Two. Rated PG. Starts Friday, November 17th at a theater near you.
It's just Warner Brothers' equivalent to The Parent Trap. I mean, it really is just The Parent Trap, except replace Haley Mills with the Olsen twins. And it's not a very good movie, honestly. Like, especially when you consider that 3 years later, Disney would actually make a really good Parent Trap remake with Lindsay Lohan in dual roles. But we'll get to that eventually. But honestly, this is a movie that obviously did a whole lot better on video, because that's where Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen really had their empire after Full House ended. Full House had just ended the spring before, and they had already been successful in the video market. And you could make the argument that Warner Brothers was testing to see whether or not these two could actually make it as featured movie stars. But like I said, the video series that they had was much more successful than the movie career that they had. I mean, it's not a bad idea to try to do this, but again, it's just the Parent Trap. Except you don't have to use special computer technology to put one person in another role. You have two twins who are the same people in the same role. I mean, it's just like. It's just the Parent Trap all over again, and not a very good version. I mean, some people may say it's also kind of similar to The Prince and the Pauper too, but come on, it's the Parent Trap. I mean, it's literally the Parent Trap in this specific case. And I won't say it's a bad movie, because Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen are trying, as are Kirstie Alley and Steve Guttenberg, but the chemistry just isn't there, and you don't really like any of these people, honestly. They're just kind of obnoxious for the sake of obnoxiousness. And this director has done a lot of great movies later on in his career. I mean, he did Fools Rush In, which is a very underrated comedy. Sweet Home Alabama is a fun little romantic comedy. So was Hitch. But then again, after that, his career kind of tailed off a little bit with Fool's Gold and the Bounty Hunter. So maybe he's not as great as I gave him credit for. But yeah, you see what there is on there. It's just the Parent Trap. It's just the Parent Trap, except it's done by Warner Brothers and replaced Haley Mills with the Olsen twins. And it's passable, but it's nothing too spectacular. It's not like, you can tell that Warner Brothers knew that Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen were going to be more successful on video, and that's why most of their movies went to video. And then the one other time they tried to get a big screen movie out of them was New York Minute, and that, of course, failed miserably. But we'll get to that in about, what are we at, 9 years from now, when we get to 2004. But anyway, that's It Takes Two. So let's move on to the last movie that we have here, and that is Jack Nicholson starring in Sean Penn's directorial effort, The Crossing Guard.
He's traced the route.
There is something you should know.
He's counted the days.
Really great news. I mean, spectacular news.
He's practiced the act.
What's your great news?
He's out. John Booth is out. I'm gonna kill him.
Now, 6 years later, one man cannot forget,
Your guilt is a little too much competition for me.
and the other cannot forgive.
I'm gonna give you 3 days.
He threatened to kill me last night.
Was he serious?
Around the marriages people have. We had a good one, didn't we?
It was a wonderful time.
So there's 3 driving past the elementary school. There's a crosswalk. Crossing guard is John Booth.
Freddie, whatever you're doing, stop it.
She is dead. She's not coming back no matter what you do. You want me to kill John Booth? That's my job in life. And your job is to go on as though nothing happened.
Jack Nicholson, David Morse, Robin Wright, and Angelica Houston. Some men wait a lifetime to cross the line. Some can't wait another day. The Crossing Guard.
Very underrated Jack Nicholson movie. This is probably one of his best underrated films, because he's not playing the typical Jack Nicholson character that we all know and love, that sly, sophisticated, cool guy. No, he plays a guy that is out for. He's kind of like an equivalent to Charles Bronson in Death Wish. He's out for revenge against this one person who killed his daughter, and it's a really good performance that's so different from what we're used to seeing from Jack Nicholson. I think it works really well here. You also have a great cast that includes Jack Nicholson's ex-wife and former co-stars in Prizzi's Honor, Angelica Houston. You also have David Morse, who's been a great actor, great character actor. Robert Wright Penn. You have Piper Laurie in here. Kalita Smith from Bernie Mac. Kari Wooler. Just some notable names in here. And this is a great movie. It's only the second movie Sean Penn's ever directed. And he's made a lot of great movies as a filmmaker. This is one of his strongest films. Definitely a very underrated thriller. I really enjoyed this movie a whole lot. If you haven't seen The Crossing Guard, definitely check it out. You're going to see one of Jack Nicholson's strongest performances ever. Great film. Can't recommend it enough. Crossing Guard, definitely check it out. And so on that note, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. We'll head into Thanksgiving weekend on the next episode with the first ever computer animated feature film, Disney and Pixar's Toy Story. We also have the reunion of Woody Harrelson and Wesley Snipes after White Man Can't Jump, Money Train, Martin Scorsese's Casino with Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci and Sharon Stone, Johnny Depp and Christopher Walken in the thriller Nick of Time. We also have Frankie Starlight and Two Bits. So 6 movies to look at next time around, and we'll delve into those on the next episode. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and as always, if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another episode. So thank you for watching, I'll see you guys next time, and until then, as always, take care.